Hi, glad you could join me. Thank you for joining me for this week's edition of Wele Football Focus. Like I indicated at the start of the day, I intend to be doing one clip per week discussing various matters around the game and how we can improve the game, maybe things that don't help our game to move forward, and generally things that are going to make this game tick and make it even more enjoyable. Today I'm going to look at a topic that somehow borders on the side part of the game, but it's still important that we discuss this topic, and as always I would also want to get your views around this same subject. And so this week, today, we are going to look at the subject around why certain youngsters that are so promising when they are youngsters don't make it at the top of the game, or why certain youngsters have blossomed at a young age, then when they get to the top reaches of the game they fail to make it. Over the years, there have been players that have promised quite a lot, and when you look back and factor what they have done, you realize that maybe not much, and they had represented a lot of potential, but what came out of that potential wasn't really something as high as the potential they may have represented. And so we're going to look at why some youngsters don't make it at the top of the game, or don't make it as high as they should. Getting into the topic, number one, there's a factor of age cheating. You need to understand this factor from the fact that these are people that are believed to be youngsters when in actual fact they are not young. These are old youngsters, if I can use that term. Now, age cheating in itself has a lot of causes why people will cheat. Chief among them is that there is this win at all cost mentality that teams across the world have embraced, both at national team level and equally at club level. Now, what this does is that, for example, for an age-restricted tournament, which is say an under-16 tournament, because the side wants to win that tournament at all costs, they'll present players that are probably 20. It is an under-17 tournament, and then people are going to present players that are 20. Now, at that stage, remember that someone is going to be competing against people that are younger than them, and so they have a lot of advantages over the people that they are competing with. And because of that, they are going to shine through. Because of that, they are going to shine like a bright light, and they're going to attract a lot of people in wanting to get them. And they'll get them. But the fact is that 4 or 5 years down the line, this individual is probably 30 now, and what you're expecting them to do is that what you can get from a player that is around 25, 26, just about hitting their prime, just about hitting their top form in their life, in their careers, and they cannot give you that because they've already passed that stage. So there's a gap of expectation that begins to emerge, and that is why some of these players do not really make it at the top. So they showed a lot of potential because they presented themselves as young people, when in fact they were not really young. Sometimes age development is also age cheating is also caused by a lack of following development stages. Really, developmental stages must be followed, but when people don't want to follow those, they try to look for shortcuts, and shortcuts, we all know what they lead to. And so in the long run, you realize that the player gets old, and when they get old, there are too many injuries that they have to battle with, and when they have these injuries, they take too long to heal. These are all signs that someone is probably older than they might have been, and because of that, they fail to make it at the top, because you were expecting them to blossom in the next 5 years, and not knowing that what they are giving you at the moment is probably their ceiling, is probably their maximum, that's probably their capacity. The other challenge with this is that the kind of training that they are going to be exposed to, for example, if you're thinking a player is 17, the kind of training you're going to give to them is somewhat different from what you're going to give, say, a 25-year-old. So at times you could be underloading them, or not giving them as much as they are supposed to have, thinking they are young, when in fact not. And that has been a problem for some of the players across the world. This has been a problem in Africa, in Asia, in South America. We can look at one or two examples. If you remember, Brazil won the 2003 FIFA Youth Championship. In that team, they had a player called Luis Alberto. Now it was later learned that Luis Alberto was actually 5 years older than the years that he was presenting. We all know how that story ended. I think he never really got to maximize on the potential that he showed, chiefly because they were expecting him to develop even much further, but he couldn't give them much more because he had reached his ceiling. There was also a story of Gaurav Moke from India. I think this was a very famous story. The guy that was 28 but actually presented himself as a 16-year-old. We all know that we never heard of him apart from that, really. This is the player that went on record to be the youngest scorer ever in the Indian Super League. But times change, things happen, and at the end of the day, people are caught up. And so that is the first reason why I think some of these youngsters don't make it at the very top of the game. Number two, there's an element of discipline, especially off the field. Now, when you're looking at the player's performance, there are 6 primary factors of performance that you have to look at. There's the physical side of the game, there's the tactical side, there's the technical side, there's the mental side of the game, there's the part which deals with nutrition, and key among these as well is the element of social life, which is the 6th factor of performance. Now, if the social aspect of life is not handled well, for example, it is going to have an effect on the physical well-being of the player. It is equally going to have an effect on the mental side of the player. Players must understand this fact that the body is their most important asset of all the things that they have, and so they must learn to take care of this body. Part of taking care of this body is what they do outside the football pitch. Now, because of the fame that comes with sometimes winning particular championships, which are youth championships, because of the fame that comes with just being known as this good youngster, it's possible that people are going to change friends out there. They're going to change how they live, the things that they do outside the pitch, and that has a ripple effect on how they're going to perform. Because imagine someone that is say abusing alcohol week in, week out. How are they going to perform? It affects their body. Imagine someone that is not getting enough sleep. They cannot be enough regeneration. The recovery process is affected after long training hours. When someone is expected to be in bed, they are roaming around, things of that sort. The long-term effect is that the body is going to be affected, and once the body is affected, then it's going to hinder someone's performance. Now imagine someone neglecting themselves over a course of 3-4 years. What are you going to get from them at the top? Basically nothing. And so these are the guys that you see might have shown a lot of potential, but along the way, he gets stuck, and then by the time you'll be realizing the opportunity would have gone, someone else would have picked the opportunity, and they're making the most out of it. So it's important that when these youngsters are coming up, I think they keep their lives in check, ensure that they protect their body, because it's the biggest asset of them. And once they protect their body, it becomes easier for them to adjust and perform according to the other factors of performance that I spoke about earlier on. The next point is around management of the players. I think there's for some it's been an issue of mismanagement of the players. There's selfishness in there. There's an element of greed in there. And at times it's equally about having divided attention. What am I talking about? What happens is that players have got handlers. Now there have been certain instances where handlers begin to protect their interests more than the interests of the player. What am I talking about? Here's a youngster, he's 16 or he's 17, he's 18. A contract is tabled by a team that is offering, say, an academy-related contract that they give them maybe 1 more year to develop. Then that's when they're going to sign a professional contract later on. That is maybe in a big club, a well-established club proven to be able to produce quality players. And then here's another offer that is tabled by, a team that is not even offering maybe a good deal in terms of further development, not offering a good deal in terms of future prospects and things of that sort. But because this other team is actually offering a lot more on the table, in that instance, someone might actually be tempted to go for the money, and this has affected a lot of players in Africa over there. Sometimes not just the greed of the handlers, it's also about the greed of the players themselves. They will look at, this is my biggest opportunity, forgetting that if they actually forego this one and go for the opportunity where there is further development and maybe future better deals in the future, they could actually get much more. Sometimes because of the levels maybe of exposure or the lack of knowledge or a lack of what these people could be offering, players are find themselves in this kind of web. And so because of mismanagement, some players have failed to make it at the top of the game. Sometimes there's also an element in youngsters. There's this syndrome of it's my talent, it's my talent, it's not your talent, let me do what I wish with my talent. There's certain youngsters that get to a certain stage where they think they can make better decisions, better than their handlers or better than the people that are actually advising them. And for some, that has been the beginning of the end, if I can use that term. Look, a youngster could be talented, but the fact that they are talented on the pitch does not mean they might be as much gifted, in terms of wisdom at that particular time. And so it's important that they still leave it up to the handlers to handle some of these things at the right time and where they're supposed to go. Sometimes being a youngster, a promising youngster, also comes with opportunities like money. Now, money means that one has to begin to do certain things off the pitch. You find this is a player, he's 18, probably playing in Europe, has an opportunity to play in Europe, and then he wants to worry about how his building is going in Africa, how his project is going wherever it is. For me, I think that is a source of divided attention. It's important that they leave some of these matters to their handlers, appoint a manager, get to a real estate firm and let them do everything for you. As long as there is monitoring, as long as there is continued accountability, let certain professionals handle some of these things for the players. And as long as we do not begin to get some of these things right, we are going to be limiting how far our players can actually go. Sometimes it's about around mismanagement. It's also an issue of maybe exposing players to wrong platforms or not exposing them to the right platforms. It's also about maybe a lack of education about certain things around how contracts work, around how the prospects that certain teams are going to present to them, and generally about the path that a player is supposed to follow. And that is one of the key things that we must try and get right in Africa. We must understand that there is a particular player pathway that is laid, proven scientifically and by whatever terms you want to use. And as long as people do not stick to this way, as long as people do not go in that way, it's really going to be a very difficult thing to get right. So that was it. I think there's a lot of mismanagement. Sometimes there's a lot of greed, a bit of selfishness, and sometimes there are just too many divided attentions. And because of these divided attentions, one cannot concentrate on the game, which is supposed to be the main thing. Number 4, sometimes there is disregard for the stages of development. This is something that is similar to what I've spoken about, but it's actually a pillar on its own. Now, for me, this is what I believe, and firmly so. Apart from coaches, there aren't any other better people that are in a position to advise if a player has got to a level where they can advance to a next stage. Now, here's a situation where you win an international youth championship, for example, for under 17, the international youth championship. At that particular time, the fans, the administrators, and whoever is concerned are convinced that these players are actually able to move on to a next level. But I think that should be a preserve of the coaches, because they look at more than what people would have been seeing on the pitch. They look at the mental development of the player. Is he able to handle the pressure? Is he able to compete? Technically, tactically, because you can easily see that one is able to perform physically, but being able to tell if they're able to compete mentally is really a different thing altogether. And if that is not done correctly, you find these are players that over a period of time they begin to struggle, and because of the struggles they fail to break through, they fail to make it through. Players must be treated as individuals and not as collective entities. When you win a championship, you cannot promote everyone at once. No, there are different stages. Treat them as individuals. Look at the strength that each one of them has, the weaknesses that they have, what is actually threatening their progress, and which areas present areas of opportunity which players can work on and go ahead to develop their game further. And so I think that once the stages of development are not paid attention to, in the long run, you get to a point where there are certain things that you expect a player to do and they are not able to do them, and that is as a result of having skipped certain stages. And this leads me to the next point. where sometimes players fail to perform at the top despite having shown a lot of promise as youngsters. They fail to perform at the top because they cannot comprehend tactics and their demands, and they cannot handle the pressure to perform. Now, at underage football, the level of tactical detail is not as sophisticated or as complicated at senior level football. This is something that we need to understand from the concept. There's a bit more freedom for young players to express themselves when they are playing junior championships, for example. There isn't much of a tactical load at that stage. Now, what happens is that when they graduate and they have not yet had this chance to comprehend tactics accordingly, they begin to find life at the top to be very difficult. You may have heard of players, African players at times, for example, that have gone to Europe. They've shown a lot of promise. They've gone to Europe and then they just fail to make it there. Sometimes it's just because they can't comprehend tactically what the coaches are asking them to do, or they cannot handle the pressure that comes with this big environment, new supporters and different demands altogether. The basically can't comprehend, mentally they can't handle it. So they fail to fit in tactically to what is being asked of them, and as a result they cannot break through. Trust me, as much as football could be a physical game, a mental game, a technical game, it so much has a lot to do with tactics, especially at the high level, because it's tactics that are going to win you football matches. It's like a game of chess. You have to respond to what the other person is doing, but at the same time as you respond, you must equally put up something for them which they must counter. If they don't counter, then you get the result. And so sometimes players just fail to comprehend with tactics, and it becomes difficult for them to work accordingly. For some of them, tactical indiscipline emerges. They just fail to perform accordingly because they can't stick to the tactical discipline. Now, remember earlier on I said there's a lot of freedom when they are playing as youngsters, or in the under 17 or whatever it is. But then when they get to the senior level, there are certain restrictions that begin to arise as a way of a team protecting itself, or as a way of a team trying to get the maximum results in a particular match. And because of this, it calls for a particular level of discipline for players that they must demonstrate. As long as they are not in a position to actually demonstrate this kind of discipline, they begin to fall off. They begin to find it very difficult to operate at the high level. Like I said earlier on, tactical loads as well are a big problem for certain players, and then the pressure is just too much for some of them. They just can't cope with it, and in the end they'll begin to think of other ways, or maybe begin to run away from the bigger challenges and want to go where it is easier. We've heard of players that have gone into Europe, for example, to try and compete in the bigger leagues, but then they cannot make it for one or two other reasons, and then the next ticket back home, they jump on the plane and they find themselves playing locally in some other African country. Not to demean our own leagues, but really if there's a chance for one to make it at the top up there, I think they must do whatever it takes, especially when a chance has been presented. They must do whatever it takes to make use of that chance to the best of their ability. So I think those are the five chief reasons. There's a lot of cheating. There's a lot of indiscipline off the field, especially as far as social life is concerned. There's a lot of mismanagement, or is it greed? Divided attention, selfishness. There's also it's also because of a lack of respect for the developmental stages, and also they cannot really handle the tactical burdens or tactical demands at the highest level, and there's too much pressure for them to perform. Aside this, there are a lot of other reasons which I can even call bonus reasons, if you like. Sometimes there's just too much pressure from the family. This is a youngster, he breaks through from youth football, and then the family wants him to take care of them. Yes, it's normal. Like in Africa, it's considered a normal thing, but sometimes that begins to weigh too much on the pressure. Instead of playing their football, they begin to think of what's happening back home, and before you realize it, they just can't break through at the top, because it requires a lot of attention up there, and they can't get that attention, and the team begins to suffer because of their lack of performance, and before you realize it, they can't be offered the contract anymore. They fail to break through at the highest of levels. Sometimes in a funny way, actually, some players are not just meant for football. Now they were playing developmental football. It was very expressive. They were also at a stage where they were yet to discover themselves. It was a discovery stage. I don't know, they just discovered that they were not meant for football. because they are not able to do this anymore, they are not able to do that anymore, they don't find it fun anymore, they don't really think it's something that they can pursue anymore, and so they just decide to look elsewhere. You think they didn't make it because they were not good enough, but because of that factor, they discover that they are meant for something else. Something else could serve them better. And so really, those are some of the reasons why I think some of these players don't actually make it at the top, despite showing a lot of promise as youngsters. As always, I want to know what you think. Let me know what you think about this subject and the many other subjects that we've talked about before. And let me know what you think we can discuss going forward. Until next time, I wish you all the best and enjoy.